So the next section we're going to move into is Module 4, Compliance, Assessing the System. So now we're going to look at, we talked about the drain covers and flow rates, now look at the rest of the system. And you have this in your folder, this inspection form. This was created as part of this grant program for DuPage County. And it follows the federal inspection form format that the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is using. The same content, all of that. It's updated, one, because their version is sign up for inspector, or for federal regulators, and has a whole page of stuff that's just not relevant to us. So the idea here, and we can tweak this, we can talk about it in the afternoon session perhaps, but this was a kind of the attempt of the primary things that we want contractors and the pool owner to be looking at. So the idea we're looking at here, we'll go into more detail of this later, but the idea is that if this information is provided by the pool contractor, pool operator, it's going to have everything you need to know, and they will have looked at everything. That should be a real tool for you. And my philosophy, best practice, would be encourage these, get this in the hands of your pool operator and say, you know what? This is going to be a lot easier for all of us if we provide this information up front. And then I'll go back to my saying is what gets monitored gets managed. So if they're like something, George, what's a song? And how do you measure it? Then that's the kind of conversations we're trying to trigger with that. So with that, let's look more closely at flow. The reason I point this out is at the time we did not realize the impact on public pools for the difference between gutter overflow flow rates and the submerged drains. Is they are designed to be able to handle 100% of the flow in a lot of cases, certainly 60-40 kind of thing. So when they talk about in this total flow, 60% of that total flow is going through the gutter overflow system that's not a safety hazard. So please be aware that we've learned since then that we really, there are times when you want to segregate. When you get at the big water parks and things, and we're talking about thousands of gallons a minute, literally, and if now the total system is 2,600 gallons a minute, but as soon as you turn off the gutter overflow system, you're at 800. Well, that's a big difference in the drain system. The drain system designed that can safely handle 800 gallons a minute because that's all it could potentially see. The water level drops or whatever. Hopefully no one's swimming in that case, but if it happened. So please be aware on the bigger the pumps, once you get above 3 horsepower, 100% of the flow, as Ray was just talking about, through the drain system is probably going to end up failing that system, and that's not appropriate. And that's the case where don't ever do it yourself, but ask the contractor, what is your flow rate? What's the flow meter say when the skimmers or gutter flow is off? I would say never touch valves first. It should be against your policy. But the reason being is, there was something blocked, there was something else, something breaks, it's going to be your fault. So make them demonstrate to you. They can say, well, they can change out the pool to go to 2,400 gallons a minute, or they can go to the time and effort to isolate it to just the drain system, because they got to do that safely depending on what the system's doing, and then measure the flow rate or the TDH. All of that, while not necessarily convenient and it's complicated, they may not understand it, it's a lot better solution than what they did in LA County and brought out the backhoes to bust out the floors of high school pools because they were counting the total flow of the gutter overflow systems and not the drains. And unfortunately, they hit 26 pools were underway before the industry went, wait a minute, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And the total bill for all of that needless work was over $2.5 million. And so that's where we, and some pools just said, we're done. High school just closed them, turn them into tennis courts or whatever. And so that's, all of that happened after this video was produced. And that's why I think it merits, please be careful. It's a 3 horsepower small residential type pool. They can turn off the skimmers and measure the flow rate, no problem. You get to the big natatoriums, water slides, different engineers need to be involved in that discussion. Okay, so our next bit, so that's on the flow meters and flow rates. Now we're going to look at selecting and inspecting the suction outlet fittings, which also means drain covers and all of that. Okay, so best practices for assessing each pump and suction system, maximum system flow rate. This is based on the flow through the drain system only. I've covered that a couple of times, but it really is important. Document the flow meter rate and confirm the accuracy of the TDH pump curve and flow rate. So that detail is, I don't have a close-up of the form, but the TDH, we have the design GPM. We need to know what's this thing designed for. It could be a turnover rate, slide, whatever the case may be. What is the goal? And then what is the flow meter reading? What is it currently? And then if the contractor will take the time to measure the TDH and then look up the pump curve and record all of that, this is the goal, they're going to find that flow way high or real low issue themselves and fix it before you come to inspect it is the goal. Okay? What they're finding, and we've learned it the hard way in the industry, is this stuff is way more complicated and you're going to find these oddball pools. Now, it turned out those were also the same ones that were getting cloudy all the time. And they were having to close them and all of that. So then we found out the reason why by using TDH. So it can be a tool. So maximum system flow rate through the drains. What is the sump depth? We're going to get into more detail in the video on that next. And then is it blockable or unblockable? That matters because we need more than one or an SVRS kind of backup system. And then the install orientation. Ray mentioned it in one video, but a lot of drain covers will have a different flow rating on the floor than on the wall. And that's a function of the air test. So you saw the video of the air pulling straight up, okay? And that goes into a big 12-inch pipe right on the form. You can't see that in the video. But that air is going 12 inches into a pipe and then pulls back out. Well, now picture that same test, turn the cover on its side and the pipe out the back. So the air goes in, makes the corner. Now we're pulling, still only allowed 5 pounds, just pulling the hair around the corner, like pulling your hose around the garden. It takes more force. That means you have to lower the flow rate to be able to pass the test. That's why you will often see one flow rate on the floor and a different one on the wall. So now one of the things we manufacturers are doing is we're saying, okay, your all flow rates are pretty good now with these modern drain covers. So what we're doing is we're just using the wall flow rating and putting it out on the floor so it's one up. We could have a higher flow rating on the floor, but they're already rated at 230 gallons a minute. They're designed for 3 horsepower pumps that only get to 160. So we're just like, well, let's quit confusing the market and aggravating the health inspectors. So we're picking one, but do be aware, and building officials also, but do be aware you will often see 2 different flow rates. And if you have 2 different flow rates and we're calculating the system, remember we're going to assume you block one. We have to assume the one with the highest flow rating is blocked. Okay, so that one's blocked now, or flow rating on the walls. So pool, spa, pump information. That's where, and there's maybe more information. I think it would be to our advantage as a society to get just the bare minimums on this. So like on the federal form, we have wading pool spas, hot tubs and pools, filtration spa jets and all of that. Really, it's not mission critical if we know the flow rate or looking up TDH. But it is important to note wading pools, spas, and hot tubs, the drains are going to be shallow. People spend a lot of time just hanging out, and girls in particular, in the 7 to 13 year age group, these are where the statistics are, they love to do handstands in water. And it's happened to 3 people I know. I have boys with short hair, so never. But they're doing handstands, and finally, a prominent builder, one of the authors of some of these standards, he asked his granddaughters, and one was 10, the other was 12 in that range, and he was watching, they were sitting in the kitchen, and they were swimming right outside the window, and they kept doing handstands over and over again, and finally he's like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, Grandpa, we're putting our hair in the drain, it tickles. True story. He never admitted, but he might have needed to go use the restroom. It terrified him. Of course, they pulled the girls out, shut down the spa, and that's why I got my story. That's why he's so focused on this, because he'd heard about this stuff and never thought about the hair entanglement. So the point being is the hair entanglement tends to be girls between 7 and 13 who don't know any better. They're innocent victims. And then the limb entrapment stuff is 6 and 7-year-olds that seem to be curious. Okay, so they're old enough that they're, you're no longer the crumb crunchers worried about where to go, what are they into now. Okay, so they're finally starting to listen before they quit listening as teenagers. And so you can kind of trust them. They know how to swim. They're doing the right thing, and now they start exploring. And that's where these limb entrapments are coming from, is curiosity. Because as you get older, you get your hand really stuck in something once or twice, and you're like, well, I don't want to do that. So those are the contexts. And so that's what makes wading pools and spas important, to pay attention to all of this, because of the curiosity kids. Certainly public pools, your hotels, motels. There's the same person who's responsible for fixing the hot water heater, not in time for my cold shower this morning, but is also the person in charge of the pool. And they just, by and large, there's high turnover rate, you don't know. So this is the area where you asking questions like this will be very helpful. Okay, so service life in years is real important. I talked about the UV and water, and the 98% of the UV damage and all of that. So this is the thing, this is the one that scares me the most in the long run. Number 2, excessive flow rate terrifies me. Because you just can't see it, you don't know it, and there's no way that somebody visiting a public spa is going to know it. You can't see it. I'm an expert. And so, but the next thing is service life, because it looks fine. Looks like a nice bright white cover, or whatever the case may be. And what has happened is it's now as brittle as your lawn furniture after 10 years. And when we need it to be strong is when it breaks, and that's what happened to Grant. So, service life, and this is important, starts when it is installed. Okay, so it comes out of the box and goes into the pool. And so that's with or without water. Okay, because UV light, even shining through windows and things, can make a difference. There was some talk about doing a different light for indoor outdoor. That became how do you, the wall and floor is challenging enough, flow ratings much less. And, oh no, it's indoor. So it's a standard life in years that's designated by the manufacturer. It's driven by the quality of the plastic, and the pool industry can be cheap. And so they want to buy the least expensive covers possibly. Well, that plastic gets brittle sooner than the expensive stuff. So you can either pay me now or pay me later, but ultimately, so some things will have a 10-year life. There's even some fiberglass stuff out at 15, 25. Stainless steel covers made by Neptune Benson. UV is not going to degrade. So you got to pay attention by cover, and it starts when the cover is installed. It's important under the revised standard. The pool installer needs to record the month and year of installation, not the date. They can do that too, it doesn't matter. But it's based on the month and year, and that documentation needs to be provided to the public pool facility owner for sure, but also on the residential side. Because either VGB, the regulated drain covers on the new or existing residential pool, you are obligated, because you're selling the drain cover, you have now triggered the VGB Act for your company. So you need to provide the instructions and the installation date to the pool owner, and you fulfilled your obligation. I would encourage you to fill out a form like this on a new or a service. In this kind of thing, there's a big box on the back where the idea is if you have 2 drains in the shallow end, one in the spa, so you can just mark, okay, what's what, especially on a public pool where one covers at the base of a spa or in a spa where it keeps getting broken or the vacuum head keeps breaking it. So they keep replacing that just in the normal course of business. To be able to keep track of that is helpful, or when everything else expires or you don't know, well then everything's got to be replaced again. So if it's a dual drain pool, not a big deal to track this stuff. But if you got a property, a resort or something that's got drain covers and pools all over the place, then this can be a service to help them manage it. And by just pointing that out, I think it's helpful. Now, here's another important thing is the dates found on the drain cover have nothing to do with service level. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's over 100 calls in the last 7 or 8 years. So people will look at a drain cover. This started happening in 2015. It's like, oh, the drain cover says ASMEA 112 2007. It's got a 5-year life. It's 2015. It's expired. Because it's 7 years from No. That date, the date for the markings on all, remember all those, the standard 2007 for ASME, the BGB 2008, APSB 16, 2011, those are all the standard that it's certified to. It has nothing to do with when it was installed. And then the other thing is often manufacturers will put what we call date wheels. Literally, they change it every single day that they're running the mold. And it'll be certainly a month and year, but often it'll be the literal date. And that's so we can just keep track of when stuff was made. And what'll happen is in the injection molding process, there'll be pins or pieces of steel that break, right? That everything wears out over time. And all of a sudden somebody in the QC department is going to go, hey, this thing's broken. So we can go back and look at those date wheels and say, okay, it broke in March. So everything with a March date or after, quarantine, get rid of it. Everything with that date and beyond is okay to sell. That's a big time tool inside of manufacturing. It also could be used in theory by the CPSC, if there's a batch recall because if you use the wrong plastic or something like that. So they could say, just like there's recalls for E. coli or soup cans with these dates, it's that purpose has nothing to do with install date. So now one of the other elements that Ray talks about is faster integrity. And so this is a big challenge for the contractors, the people actually doing this installation, where we take a drain cover off and go to put a replacement in its place. Well, we have to use the screws that came with the manufacturer. But if you have a cover that's designed for threaded inserts, brass threads, and they're pulled out of the plastic grate, it's not going to work. So they can't install that grate unless the manufacturer provides a way to handle it. So this is an example of some of our instructions on what to look for a big existing 18 by 36. So it could have that it's just a totally stripped out hole, non-compliant. It could be that the fastener is no longer anchored in the concrete.
Of course they do.
Or the fastener itself, plastic or brass or whatever, is stripped out. In any case, if the installing threaded in as a contractor, just pull on it. If it'll hold, because there's multiple screws, get on down the road. It's not like you need a tool to measure the torque or any of that. But if it pulls out, that's what we're worried about. Then they have a choice of replacing the plastic frame, or what I refer to as abandoning it in place. And what they do is they can go over to another screw hole if the cover supports it. And we have many that do and many that don't, so it's cover specific. Drill a new hole in the concrete or in the plastic if the manufacturer says it's okay, and then put in a new screw and then you're good to go. So these instructions, if any one of these things happen, we've got extra screw holes in offset of each of these. So don't use that one. You can use the next one over. Now this is important for a couple of reasons. One, face value concept, but the other thing is for you as inspectors looking into a pool or spa, you might see a drain cover that's got 4 holes and only 2 screws. Well, you're going to have to look at the instructions, or the contractor will need, because we have lots of round drain covers that have 4 screw holes. 2 that are in close for brand A, rotated 90 degrees, 2 that are far apart for brand B. So whichever pool it's used on, there's always going to be 2 open holes. And then you get into these big guys, and I think the count is up to like a dozen. So we actually, again, to not aggravate you, we roll little caps that they can push into the holes that are not supposed to be used so it will look good. It's not a requirement. Well, maybe this will be a sales feature. All the holes have a shiny part in it. That's not always the case. And your round cover, universal covers, we have one that I think it supports 19 prior products. So it's got holes labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And so again, it's on the contractors to figure all of that out. Others, we have multiple locations so we can dodge holes in the plaster. And our instructions say you got to have one screw in each quarter of the cover. They don't have to be across from each other. There's 3 holes in each quarter. You just got to have a screw in one. Okay, so that is the detail that you can find in the instruction.
This pool had an 18 by 18 inch frame with a flat grate. As you can see, there are screws missing and the grate is even broken. If you look carefully, you'll notice that an 8-inch suction line is a little more than 2 inches away. All the flow for this 77,000-gallon pool is concentrated at the center of the suction fitting. When the pool was brought into compliance in 2009, a new ASME 19.8 compliant cover was installed over this field fabricated sump. Referring to the manufacturer's installation instructions, this particular suction outlet fitting requires 1.5 diameters of pipe clearance, or 12 inches. Obviously, 2 inches is insufficient clearance. This pool is not compliant with the Act. This is not a problem with the cover. It is an issue of incorrect installation. Unless the pool was inspected closely before the modification or a mask was used to inspect underwater, there is no way to verify from the deck that the pool is compliant with the Pool and Spa Safety Act.
So here's some graphics of field-built sumps. And so measuring sump depth, is from the frame or some point based on the cover manufacturer's instructions down to the pipe opening. And if it's coming in from the bottom or the back, it's easy to know where you measure. But when it's a horizontal pipe like this, it's from the inside edge of the pipe up to wherever you're measuring to. In the future, all manufacturers will give you a sump depth based on measuring from the plaster down to the pool surface down to the pipe. The whole idea is, again, to make it easy for inspection for you if you happen to be doing it, but for certain is you just hook a tape measure, look, and say, yep, I'm good or not. Versus the current standard is to the underside of the cup. We didn't think through how do you measure that? So there's some room for improvement. So the sump depth, 1.5 pipe diameters, or specified by the manufacturer's 1 element. But here's something that I see a lot as a manufacturer, and that's where they got the pipe depth, but it comes, it's a plastic bucket that's round. Actually, let me do it the easy way. I'll show you. So here you have a plastic bucket, and then that's a circle with a square frame over it. And where that red arrow is pointing, it's hard to see on that video, it might be, but the plaster is right flush underneath the cover. So when you put the cover installed, it's blocking those holes in the corner. Okay? And so we need a little bit of clearance. Again, this is on the contractors to pay attention to this kind of thing. But sump depth, this is part of it. Because this, even though the pipe's down low, would still concentrate flow away from these corners, which is not how the drains are tested and certified. So when we go back and look at the figure 2 sump, because in the video they talked about that drain cover that was shown needs 1.5 pipe diameters. So if we look at that concept at the edges, it's not just the 1.5 pipe diameters, it's what's going on out here in the corner. So that's 1 pipe diameter. So if it's 1.5 pipe, they need to have kind of an edge that goes down so there's room for water to flow. Now I'm going to go back to these graphics. Ours are not color like this, but this is the underlying models that we use. So you can see in our instructions is we want it to taper from the edge, but we can have an angle on it. It doesn't need to be perfectly straight, and it doesn't need to come down one pipe diameter like you see on this side. So this is okay. Again, this is important for contractors to pay attention to. And the main thing is it just need a little bit of room for water to flow. Basically, even in a square drain, if we have a square sump, 12 by 12 by 12 inches deep, and the pipe's dead center like a picture in the center. Even if that square, if this drain was squared out, the water is going to flow in that funnel shape anyway. That's the physics of water. So that the fact that we have square corners and drains doesn't do anything for safety or hydraulics. It's not required. You just need a path from the openings to the pipe is all that's needed. And so that's the point there. Again, this is all nuance that's really intended for the installers. So hopefully they'll get this information. Okay, so selecting the covers compatible with the existing pool structure and system flow rate. So these are the key takeaways that we need to know. And as inspectors, these are the questions I think you would want to ask of the property, whoever you're dealing with, is what is the maximum system flow rate? Again, if it's a small residential type pump in a residential world, then the maximum pump flow is probably going to be fine. Don't be afraid. If you see little equipment, say what's your flow rate? What are your drains rated for? Probably those things are going to work out fine. The bigger the pool, the bigger the drains, the more then we're going to be interested in what is the flow through the drains only. 2 is what is that sump depth? Just roughly speaking, do we have the proper sump depth? I went into a lot of detail here on what the contractors need, but generally speaking, if you say, okay, what's the sump depth of your system? And they say, well, we need figure 2. And you say, well, what pipe size is it? And they go, I don't know. Then that would be the time. It's like, maybe why don't you look into that? Let's talk about this again in the future, kind of a thing. And then they make a choice. Is it might be easier to chip out a little bit to keep that current figure 2 drain cover, so they don't have to get a permit from the state. Or it might be, well, that's way more work in the pool, so it's easier to just go to a zero sump depth or a different product that doesn't need it in the permits application resistance. But the main thing is we really want to identify what we see. I don't have a slide number, but it's in the video, and I see it in the middle of page 24. That where the pipe is right up against the bottom of the cover. That it would be helpful if you guys could identify, because that is a legitimate concern there. So sump depth, and then fasteners is confirming that the installer, used the fasteners that came from the manufacturer originally. One of the things in Abigail Taylor in Illinois that was the track that triggered the federal law. It was all the VGB Act missed in 2005 by 1 vote. The final vote of Congress before they were done for the year, missed by 1 vote. And then it never went anywhere in 2006 until Abigail Taylor was eviscerated in a public pool outside of, she was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was a golf course, driving range literally right outside. It was a big fence, big screen fence, but there was a driving range right next. And it was a single drain, weight kiddie pool, single drain, 8-inch, with a skimmer tied together. And then they went back to the pump. And kids, they put a new drain cover on it. This was before the VGB Act, obviously. So they put a new approved ASME cover on it, but the frame in the pool was stripped out. So the pool guy, who was also the lawnmower mechanic for the golf course, went to Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, and bought drywall screws and secured them. And they lasted a grand total of 3 weeks before rusting out. Some bratty little teenage kids were in the play pool, weren't supposed to be, it's all in the report, pulled the cover off, and they were flinging it in the main pool as a frisbee. It's an anti-vortex top. Abigail, 6 years old, believed she needed to go to the restroom, went, oh, there's a potty-shaped thing. I sat on it, was eviscerated. And she died 9 months later. And so this is another one of those stories that's personal. I actually worked for the company that manufactured some of the products. And so I was the one who had to meet the fail. And so they obviously it's tragic, but they became extremely reasonable and supportive. It's like we're doing, because we showed them the standard of what we're doing. It's like we're doing education, we're doing what we can. We understand what's right, what we need, kind of like the electrical outlet systems. We know we need GFCIs and all of that. They exist in the marketplace. But if homeowners insist on wiring their own little extension and, alligator clipping stuff together, that's not home builders or the industry's fault. They're not doing the right thing, and that's kind of what happened. So fasteners become important. Technically, you're supposed to use those that come with the manufacturers, but if they're all stainless steel and the right thing, sometimes I deal with people who will use, interchanging manufacturer screws because they have one, because they got a truck full of all of this. So if they're using drain cover fasteners that use, actually this won't hit your radar at all, but that is, they're achieving the goals. Flow rate, sump depth, and fastener are keys to preventing the traffic split. So now we're going to look at secondary systems. This was pretty straightforward and easy, in large part because it's received so much attention. Okay, so we're looking at backup systems for systems that are not unblockable. So let's review unblockable again. So unblockable is a cover that does not completely shadow the sump opening. It could be a channel, a thin one that sticks out. It could be a circle where just part of the edge sticks out, or it could be a big square one like this, or big rectangles. So these are classified as unblockable. Their flow rating is going to be based on when they're blocked, like you see in that picture. So the flow rating is based on that open area when it's blocked, not the total area. So it's already in a worst case scenario flow rating, and that's why you don't need a backup. And certainly when you start adding 2 or 3 of these, you get to add all of them together, because it's assuming every one you add is mostly blocked. So the unblockable flow ratings are very conservative in that regard. So unblockable matters because if it's a blockable cover, then we need to get separation. So we're going to go back to our form now, and this is on page 2, I believe, the back side of this. And so part 4, single drain systems. So number 1 is the single drain system, yes. Okay, we only got one. Now what? Is it unblockable with a sump opening that cannot be shadowed by the 18 by 21 or 23 blocking element? So if it's unblockable, then you say yes, and you're done. Okay, if it's a single unblockable, you're done. Oh, yeah. We've already handled flow rate and all of that, sump depth and all that previously. So if it's blockable, it's a single drain, yes. Is it blockable? No, then go to the next section. Then is it a multiple drain system at least 3 feet apart? So under the federal law, if you've got dual drains, but they're closer than 3 feet, then you have to treat it like a single drain and go to a backup system. So if we have a classic single 8-inch 12 by 12 drain, see those all over the country, and it's direct to the pump, then a secondary system is required. And that could be any one of these that are listed, a safety vacuum release system, compliant to ASME A112 1917. The drain cover standard was 8, the SBRS standard is 17, or ASTM 2387. And then record the manufacturer model and all of that. Suction limiting vent system, I can't imagine there are many of them up here because they're a nightmare to winterize. They're all over the world, by the tens of thousands of them. Gravity drainage system, again, we see those in a lot of public pools. I don't know how you winterize them unless they drain them all the street. And then automatic pump shutoff is just a pump motor that when the vacuum gets too high, it shuts itself off. And those are voluntarily certified by those manufacturers to the SBRS standard. Because there's performance, you block a drain, does it shut off? So they test to that, but the labeling doesn't match. They do that voluntarily. And then drain disablement is certainly an option under federal law. But most codes, including your code, requires drains at the deepest part of the pool and all of that. The reason they're not required federally or through the ANSI standards, the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, and even the Model Aquatic Health Code, is drains don't help circulation other than the fact they provide water to the pump. Okay, water, the pump has to take, needs water to pump. But the reason being is suction. If you think about vacuuming the pool or even cleaning up with a shop vac, vacuuming your car mats or whatever, it only cleans right where your vacuum's running, right? It doesn't clean very far away. That's because air and water, the physics are the same. If you think of air and waters as molecules or marbles, okay? It's a collection of marbles, and we can push them, but you can't pull them. Okay, so you can't have a drain in the deepest part of the pool that's going to send chlorine to the shadows in the corner where algae's growing. The only way you're going to circulate water to that problem area is with a return or a nozzle pointing over there, circulating. And a good way to see this is, well, if you travel as much as me, you see it daily almost, but is at the airport, if you've ever looked outside at the jet engines, okay, when the airplane parked there, you'll see the painted circles, big red half circles. Okay, and those are 14 feet away from that engine. And Boeing says that you can stand 14 feet from a running jet engine at takeoff thrust and not get sucked into it. This is not a theory I'm going to test personally. But but that's the rationale. Is a plane can pull up and someone could literally, your luggage could be that close, outside that red line, and they won't get sucked into the engine. But you stand behind it, same amount of air going into the front of the engine. So at full thrust, the suction danger zone is 14 feet on the great big Airbus engine. Behind it is 1,700 feet. The air is doing 100 miles an hour. So you can walk in front of a running jet engine. I'm still not advising it, but you can walk around the nose of a running jet engine safely. You walk around the back and you're doing over TCAL. And if you want to try this out, you can go down to St. Martin. There's actually an airport that comes in right on the beach. And I have a picture of this in previous presentations. But so there's a jet getting ready to take off, and there's a bar conveniently right next door. So you go get liquored up, and then go stand up against the chain link fence, and then the jets take off, and then watch the people tumble out. I personally watch this from the bar school. Tumble out into the water, and one of my coworkers actually has done this. And he had just turned 21. He goes to this bar, he gets liquored up, and he sees everyone lined up for a jet to take off, so he did it. He said it blew him. He was skipping across the water out, 100 feet or so. And he said that was embarrassing and traumatic, but he said he wore sand pockmarks for 2 weeks. He got sandblasted by this. The point of that being is a jet engine, you could walk within 15 feet of a running jet engine, but you can't walk behind it. So drains are our jet engine. They're only going to clear a little bit of their flow is only going to happen a little bit close to it, like a shop vac. It all matters on the return side. For this reason, we don't need drains for circulation. Now, the pool industry freaked out over this concept, especially up here where it's cold, we heat the pool. They said, well, we need the drains to heat so that we don't have cold water like getting into the lake. Well, if you go swimming in a pool, and as you get in deeper water, it's heated, and your feet are cold, and your chest is nice and warm, guess what the chemical's like down low? If it's not circulating the heat around, it's not circulating the sanitizer. So if the drains are making a difference in how the pool is filtering and circulating, it's a terrible design in the first place. If it's public pool, it needs to be done. So that's why we don't need drains for circulation. Often we need, for the older pools, we need all of that flow to maintain turnover. So it may not be an option in that regard. So skipper pools, okay. Drain-only pools, no. From a filtration point of view. Obviously, you get the booster pumps and water slides and all that with the feed drains on. The other place that we can't get away from them is spas. They have a high flow rate. And often you can't even get a skimmer in the fancy overflow rate and all of that. So there's another case where we always need drains. So they have their place, they just gotta be handled safely. All right, so the final section, home stretch. So vacuum fittings and equalizer. This is the standard IAPMO SP4, and under the APSP standards, fitting like this is required. It's recommended to stop, and Florida changed it. They were the state that required a dedicated vacuum force. All of those limit brackets were in Florida. So they wisely pulled that requirement out. Some people are putting it up in the deck under cover, again, where it's not going to be readily accessible, or they've just gone to the portable equipment for vacuum. So did you guys catch my cameo on this? Looked a lot like my hand. It's not provided the vacuum fittings. They called at the 11th hour wanting footage, and so I break that up in my garage. It's kind of fun. So best practices for assessing each pump and system, maximum system flow rate. You notice that one yet? Gotta know the flow rate. Sump depth. Is it blockable or unblockable? We need that to know if we need a secondary system. If we have multiple blockable drains, is the spacing 3 feet or located on 2 planes? So they can be closer together under Illinois law and the federal law. I didn't go into that detail in this video. So that if you have 2 drains on the floor of the pool or spa, they have to be 3 feet apart, center to center. If not, we consider them 1. They're less than that. But they could be right next to each other, one on the floor and one on the footwell. Or you could have one drain on the floor of the pool and a second one on the wall. So watch out. It wasn't common, but it did happen. Is there was a lot of single pools flagged as single drain, and they missed that the second drain was up on the wall. And again, that's going to be is this a 1 drain or 2 drain system kind of a thing? One of the other gotchas that happened early on is there would be 2 drains 3 feet apart in a spot. You're thinking, okay, they got approved covers, all's good. And then you go look at the equipment pad and wait a minute, there's 2 pumps. It was 2 single drain systems in one spot. One was for the filtration, another was for the booster pump for the spa jets. So just because you see 2 drains or even 1 drain, it can be some gotcha. Again, these are all questions to ask the pool operators. Daily maintenance, I told you the story of the debris that we, cases where the multiple drains were plugged up. So again, in this case as an inspector, if the place is a mess and there's plugged drain covers, I think that's worthy of saying something. But for the idea of you to go pull drain covers off to see if the internals are plugged, forget that. The good news is there's only 2 or 3 drains on the market that have internal parts where stuff can collect. Most of them, it's either in 100% of our stuff. Not picking on my competition, but 100% of ours, if it goes through the openings, it's gone. Okay, so there's nothing inside of those covers to block up. Again, this is an important thing for the contractors. And with that brings us to the end of this.